My name's Pendle Marshall-Hallmark, and I'm here because I want to talk a little bit about moving to Colombia, and that's where I was the last year and a half working with a human rights organization there called Fellowship of Reconciliation Peace Presence, a nonprofit organization, and they are based primarily in Bogota, Colombia. And they have a few other, they have two teams. There's one in Bogota, Colombia, and then one in another region of the country called Urabá. And essentially, probably knows a little bit about Colombia, but basically a little bit of background. Colombia's been in the longest civil war in the Western Hemisphere. It's been around for decades and decades and decades, and essentially it's an armed conflict between the Colombian government, so the military, the Colombian military, and excuse me, a left-wing guerrilla group called the FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, and they've been fighting constantly. And then there's also civilians, so people who are living in the cities or in the countryside, who don't necessarily identify with any one of those groups, but are caught in the middle. And so my work, and essentially what they do is something called international accompaniment work. So international accompaniment is essentially where foreigners will come to an area where there's a conflict going on, and they will, at the request of activists or civilian groups that are being affected by the conflict, come and accompany those groups or those activists to keep them physically safe, like physically accompany them when they're in an area where there's a conflict, but also to advocate for them with the country's military or with the country's government, with other diplomatic entities. So my work consisted of accompanying human rights leaders, community leaders throughout different parts of Colombia, and then reporting on that essentially to other embassies in Bogota or to people in the Colombian government, talking with Colombian military leaders to try to talk about how these people were being affected by different armed groups within the conflict. And the whole idea is that we are kind of bearing witness to the changes that they're trying to bring attention to, because they are regularly telling anybody who will listen that the conflict in Colombia is by no means over. Yeah. And I, at least in my line of work, was finding a lot of really brave people who are really interested in protecting human rights, that really value their community, that really value the arts. So I think I can tell you I haven't met a single person in Colombia who supports the idea of violence in that country. And everybody wants to find a way to make it a more peaceful place.